All right, first rule of the channel, we did not talk about this channel. Second rule of the channel, this is not legal advice. So this is going to be the running back target video. I'm going to break down like all the running backs that are out there right now, the guys that I am targeting, the guys that I'm a little bit interested in, the guys that I would definitely be fading at price overall. In this one, I do want to be breaking down like what I would be looking for in running backs, like what is valuable from a fantasy football perspective in general. I just did the Ramondre Stevenson contract extension video. I was planning on getting the quarterback target video done this week, but that came up, and then that shifted my focus to looking at the running back market, and I didn't like how the videos were coming out, so I split that Ramondre video into this one. There's a little bit of overlap between the two, and that's why I generally just didn't like doing them, together, because I end up talking about Ramondre a lot, and I want to talk about like the individual running backs and not kind of get sidetracked. So last year, the league winner was Kyren Williams at price. He ends up being an elite running back, even with the injuries, at like 21 points a game. And remember, like your scoring settings and my scoring settings, they may end up being different. Christian McCaffrey did have a legendary season. Those ones, I think it's like 23 points a game. And again, your scoring settings and my scoring settings may be different, or above is when we start looking at those legendary type seasons. Generally speaking, the bar is going to be 1,500 yards from scrimmage for the running back. And then you're looking at like 10 to 15 touchdowns. That makes a running back one, right? And then outside of that, like then you're starting to get into like RB2 range. Just because a guy finishes like in the top 10 does not make him an RB1. Like it's about these points. And to bring this one up, and that's why I like bringing up some of the ESPN one, because it's easy to visualize. When we look last year at like your Alvin Kamara's or Raheem Mostert, your Devin Achane's, your like Breece Halls and stuff like that, like these guys, they may end up as RB1s, but they are not as valuable as your Christian McCaffreys or even your Kyren Williams at that 21 points per game. So if I can go get a Rachaad White later in a draft and he does 15.8 points, like, and Alvin Kamara's running back 3 when it comes to points per game, like who is getting the better value if I have to go up and spend like a second round pick on this is like a bad example relative to last year, but like Travis Etienne, if I got to go spend like a second round pick to get 16.6 points a game, and someone else in my league gets Rachaad White in like the 5th round of the draft and he gets 15.8 points a game, like who's closer to winning a league at that point, especially if the guy who took Rachaad White hits on the pick instead of getting Travis Etienne. So like that's the idea behind some of this, like appropriately valuing players, knowing when to take your shots, your risk, and when to play it safe and punt and stuff like that. Like that would be the idea behind some of the stuff that we're going to be talking about today, trying to identify this year's Kyren Williams. The biggest thing with last year with Kyren Williams that we got wrong on is we thought that Cam Akers was going to run the backfield. Now, there were some people that I've listened to after the fact that said like those people that followed Rams camp knew it was going to be Kyren Williams the whole way, and it just generally didn't shake out into the rest of the larger fantasy football landscape to know that. So to take that dart throw on Kyren Williams wasn't happening in a lot of leagues because, generally, if you weren't following those people in the know for Rams camp, like you just weren't going to find out. So like that would be the idea behind it, like trying to make sure we don't get wrong on Kyren Williams, what we do this year, going into next year, even though I think like Kyren Williams is generally going to be overvalued this year in general. So the other thing, and I kind of talked about this in the the Ramondre Stevenson video, is I generally do want pieces of good offenses, because the two things that I want from a fantasy football perspective for a running back is I want design passing work. Well, specifically design passing work. I want receiving work, specifically design receiving work. I want red zone opportunity. Everything else really doesn't matter. And that's why I have some of the ability to bring some of these guys up. And the king of efficiency that we will talk about here, even though he's like, old now, but Alvin Kamara being the king of efficiency. And this is where it really changed my mind from a fantasy football perspective. It's like we were heavily opportunity based before Alvin Kamara. And then we started realizing it's not about opportunity. Well, it is about opportunity. It's about specific opportunity. And the better right opportunity that a player gets, right? Like the red zone opportunity and the design receiving work, it doesn't really matter if he's getting just bulk volume, because the bulk volume has less of an ability to turn into fantasy production. So, red zone opportunity and design passing work, and you're going to be able to find league winners at that point. Usually the guys attached to good offenses are going to have more red zone opportunity. And I can actually go bring this one, running back red zone stats. That's like Raheem Mostert attached to the Dolphins, Christian McCaffrey attached to the 49ers. They are just going to get a lot of opportunity because those offenses are going to be in the red zone. And then the guy who gets in the red zone more often and gets more touches in the red zone converts that into touchdowns. And then Bob's your uncle. That's how you win leagues. That's part of the reason why Kyren Williams was so special last year, is because he doesn't have to be necessarily like a good athlete. He could just be in a very good situation where he's getting red zone opportunities and he's getting a little bit of receiving work. He wasn't even getting like designed receiving work. He was just kind of a check down monster, but he got a check down monster opportunity within the red zone, and he was able to cash in 13 of his red zone targets in the 3 touchdowns. Like, that's what we're looking for. Now, the other guy I want to bring up in all this is Tony Pollard last year. Here's a guy who's attached to a good offense, and I can bring this one up when we talk about the Dallas Cowboys at the 5th best offense when it comes to yards. I think they were the most when it came to points per game, or they were second, something like that. They were most when it came to points per game. So anyway, with Tony Pollard all the way down here, what you run into is, can a running back actually cash in the opportunities that he was given? So last year, Tony Pollard attached to this, like the highest scoring team in football, the 5th best when it came to yards per game. He just generally didn't cash in his opportunities, but he had a lot of opportunities. He had 57 red zone opportunities, or red zone carries. He only cashed 4 of those in for touchdowns. He also had 11 red zone targets. He didn't cash any of those in for touchdowns. So I still want the logic behind that. I still want the guy that has 57 red zone carries and 11 red zone targets. I still want that guy. It's just going to be like fantasy football, the unlucky portion where he's not able to return on that in a way that like Christian McCaffrey is able to return on, or Raheem Mostert's going to be returning on. So like, yes, finding guys attached to good offenses is a good idea. Finding opportunity funnels attached to like okay offenses is also going to be a good idea. The guys that we do want to generally stay away from are going to be the guys attached to these bad offenses all the way down here, because they're going to get less red zone opportunities. So it doesn't even matter if they get all the red zone opportunities for their teams. They're generally just not going to get as many red zone opportunities. So this is where we start talking about like price with some of these guys, because like some teams that we think are going to be bad are going to be good, and some teams that we think are going to be good are going to be bad. Like, so last year we thought the Bengals were going to be elite. They weren't. We also thought that where's the other one? The Chiefs were going to be elite, and they weren't. So in general, I want to bring this back up when it comes to yards. In general, this is what we're looking at. Some of the teams that we thought were not going to be necessarily good, the Rams, the Packers, and the Texans, they were in that top third of guys. And then down here at the bottom, one of the teams that we thought was going to be like really bad because of Baker May, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, were able to crack that like not bad type of area. And then your Mike Evans and your Rashad Whites end up returning on investment. So we don't necessarily need to get a lot more out of the Panthers or the Patriots or even the Giants for those guys to be able to return on investment, because all they have to be able to do is get us about like 1,500 yards and 10 to 15 touchdowns. Now, again, I say all they got to do, but if we can't tell that story when it comes to their if we can't tell that story, then like, why would I be drafting like an imperfect prospect? That's how I look at it. Like, that could be someone else's problem. If I can tell that story about how that guy gets there, they become a lot more interesting to me. Now, I'm using this ESPN rankings because I can mark it up and it looks prettier to me than using the Fantasy Pros ECR. I will be talking about Fantasy Pros a little bit, but for the most part, because rankings are not necessarily locked in right now, what I am going to be using more is this one to talk about, just so like I can visualize it and it's prettier to look at overall than anything else. That's just how I'm going to do it. So anyway, let's break it down. Like CMC, Brees, and Bijan, I shouldn't have to talk very much about. They're going to have the things that we want in the case of red zone opportunities. They should have a lot of those. They should be the guy that gets those opportunities, and they're going to get design passing work. We all want them. They're unicorns. They may have downsides to them. CMC is getting older. He may have a little bit of competition for opportunity. I'm not worried about that, because I'm not necessarily buying a legendary season. I'm buying a guy for the chance at a legendary season. I'm buying a running back one, right? So the lottery ticket on these guys is going to be those legendary type seasons down the line. Brees Hall, there may be a little bit more competition for opportunity. The offense doesn't necessarily have to become good from last year with the Aaron Rodgers injury to bring one of these things up. They just have to go from being the second worst offense to being basically the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and you're going to have like enough return on investment, considering that I think he led all running backs in targets last year. Brees did. So moving on, Bijan Robinson, with the expectation this offense is going to become very pass heavy, I could definitely tell the story where Bijan Robinson is second on the Falcons in targets, which from a fantasy perspective, I want them design passing plays. I will take that. So the offense can be better because of Kirk Cousins. And if the offense is better because of Kirk Cousins, at the very least, I'm probably getting the number 3 when it comes to targets attached to this offense. Maybe there's a chance I can get the number 2. I would rather have uh, targets than I would want carries. That's what I talked about last year. Why I had Brees so low is if he's just going to get run into the back of the offensive line, I don't like that. I want him to get red zone opportunities and I want him to get targets. That's what we're looking at this year with Bijan, and I can actually be a little bit interesting and bring this guy's up. This is why I talk about this stuff. So all he has to do is be able to increase his targets or get more efficient targets, and you're going to have the possibility of a league winning upside. The other thing to look at with Bijan at his price that I would talk about is he doesn't substantially have to increase his rushing touchdowns, but if he is attached to a good offense that has more red zone opportunities, he's generally going to get more touchdowns, even if he's not the goal line back. So there's a ridiculous road for Bijan Robinson to break fantasy this year. And unfortunately, and this is why I kind of wanted to stay a little bit away from talking about these guys too much. Like in your auction league, you're probably going to have to overspend on them. In your snake draft leagues, you're going to have to get lucky and get the right pick. That's the long and short of it. Now, Jonathan Taylor, Saquon Barkley, I'm going to talk to these guys. I generally think that they're being valued at their ceilings. I don't like drafting guys at their ceilings. If I go over here to Fantasy Pros, Jonathan Taylor, running back, or it's 12 overall, I think that's better overall. And Barkley is going 14 overall. I think that's better. So on ESPN, where these guys are going at, to bring up the right one, 9 and 10, they're being drafted at their ceilings. The two things that we want, and I'm going to repeat this, are design passing work and red zone opportunities. Both these guys are going to be flawed when it comes down to that. Jonathan Taylor is going to potentially get vultured by Anthony Richardson when it comes to that red zone opportunity to score touchdowns. He's probably not going to get design passing work in that offense. So these outlier type seasons, and I can bring this one up to explain this, it is very difficult, not impossible, for guys to get home from a fantasy football perspective, having these high opportunity rushing seasons that they're able to convert into this like high productive rushing seasons. In general, though, we just want the receiving upside because those guys are going to end up being more valuable, even if you're not in like PPR scammer leagues. So like Austin Eckler, when he finished as running back 1 and he had 722 yards, like he only had 915 rushing yards. He had 13 rushing touchdowns, red zone opportunities, and receiving work. That's how guys win you leagues, right? So in the first place, that's why I would move down both. I'll move this over here so I can find it easier. I would move down Jonathan Taylor and Saquon Barkley. So you're not going to get probably a lot of design receiving work with Jonathan Taylor. Saquon Barkley, that's just generally not how Jalen Hurts has functioned throughout his career. So unless he ends up developing into a pocket passer underneath Kellen Moore as the new offensive coordinator, like I don't know how Barkley's going to get a lot of design passing work. They just generally have not used their running backs, or Philadelphia hasn't. The only thing that we could talk about in this case when it comes down to that, and I'll bring up Swift. Last year, he gets 30 or 49 targets, 214 yards. Like design passing work. Maybe they'll do that with Barkley. They're also going to have a 4th round draft pick, Will Shipley, and they're going to have Kenny Gainwell back. So there may be competition for opportunities. That's on top if Jalen Hurts remains the red zone, basically the de facto red zone fullback. So those two things that we want, we're just looking at a guy that may be very good in between the 20s, and that does not translate into fantasy football success, especially at the price that he's going. I don't know how they return on investment. Now, Kyron Williams, in general, I did like until they went and they drafted Blake Corum in the third. Now, if I can tell the story, it becomes harder for me to go like, if Kyron Williams gets 30% or 70% of the work attached to this offense, yeah, he's going to be able to return on investment when he's going at like running back 6. On Fantasy Pros, it's already baked in that he is a little less valuable going at running back or 19 overall. So maybe in this case, we can guess with Kyron Williams that it's only going to be a 70-30 split if he's going at about like 20 overall. If it's going to be closer to a 50-50 split with Blake Corum because of the third round draft capital, like, yeah, he's definitely overvalued at this point. And I will bring up multiple times where Najee Harris and Jalen Warren are going on ESPN. They're going 75 and 76. These are guys that are projected to be in 50-50 backfield splits where we can't guess who's going to get like some of the work. Najee is the check down monster. Jalen Warren may be more of the design receiver. When it comes to red zone opportunity, it's probably going to end up going to Najee, and they're going 75, 76 on ESPN. On Fantasy Pros, they're going a little bit better when it comes to their two prices. And I should have looked this up ahead of time, but again, being super prepared. Jalen Warren's going 85 overall, and then Najee's the guy that's going slightly above him at 70 overall. These are guys that are part of they're going to be in a 50-50 timeshare split with that split, the special split of opportunity, not being really something that we can predict ahead of time on an offense that projects to be like in the okay range with Russell Wilson's coming in. Like there's some stuff to like about the Pittsburgh Steelers. So we can't just downgrade them overall because they project to be like bad. Like they're going to be in a 50-50 timeshare split. So when I talk about some of these guys that do project to be in these 50-50 timeshare splits, like I would expect that they would compress in some way, shape, or form towards Najee and Jalen Warren, because that's what we project them to be. And the larger the disparity between these two guys, I'm always going to go for the cheaper guy. That's going to be Blake Corum. If I'm right on Blake Corum at 46, running back 46 overall on ESPN, and you draft Kyron Williams and it's a 50-50 timeshare, and like you could get right and get 45% or 55% of the snaps with Kyron Williams, and I get 45%. But the fantasy gods, and this is why I talked about Tony Pollard already, the fantasy gods allow me to have Blake Corum get the magical special touches within the red zone and the design receiving work in a way that Kyron Williams doesn't, and I still win. That's where I get Alvin Kamara. So when I talk about some of these guys, that's what I'm looking at. Is like, well, why aren't we appropriately valuing Blake Corum because of the draft capital that he's going to eat into Kyron Williams in a particular way? Why is Kyron Williams that high? If Kyron Williams was lower, and I'm talking like 20 picks lower, I would be like, okay, I understand that. There's still a possibility that he's going to get 70% of the work and it's going to get the right work. If it's not, like, why is Blake Corum so low? Because even if we're not expecting that to occur, there's still that possibility. Why isn't it being appropriately priced into both these guys? Now, Fantasy Pros, it does look like they're appropriately valuing Kyron Williams a little bit. I probably think he's too high. He may end up being closer to this year's David Montgomery, which means like, yeah, you're looking at like somewhere in the 40s is where he should be going. And Blake Corum should be probably steamed up to, maybe this group of guys like on ESPN, like 96 to 103, like, outside of where he's going, like 138 on ESPN. On Fantasy Pros, Blake Corum's going like 130 overall. So again, like I would generally think that he should be going slightly higher in this range of guy. Like he should be going above Zeke at this point. In this range, like, yeah, like now we're into like Jalen Warren is probably about where Blake Corum should be going, attached to what projects to be like an okay to good offense, and with the possibility of being in timeshare. The other thing, and this is part of the thing, is like I don't like necessarily drafting quote unquote handcuffs unless they maybe have a league winning upside. So if I'm looking at drafting a Blake Corum to be an RB2, but I have the ability to get that 21 points a game that Kyron Williams got last year, like that is something I'm like heavily interested in. I can't be wrong on this Blake Corum pick. The more that I I tell that story, it's harder and harder for me to believe that Blake Corum pick is not going to end up at least winning me some fantasy football weeks down the line. So that's just something I would be interested in, and that's why I would generally be taking Kyron Williams off the board unless he tumbles like multiple rounds at this point. Now, I am not targeting Jahmyr Chase and Isaiah Pacheco. These would be punts to me because they're both imperfect in their own special way. So Jahmyr Gibbs and Isaiah Pacheco are projected to be attached to good offenses. We do like that. Jahmyr Gibbs is the guy that looks like is going to get the design passing work attached to a good offense. That's good stuff. And I even talked about like there's a possibility with Jahmyr Gibbs. You're looking at the ceiling of something along the lines of an Alvin Kamara type season, probably not like 2018 or 2020, probably closer to 2018. The problem that you're going to run into with what's his face? Jahmyr Gibbs is there is going to be some type of opportunity share with David Montgomery. And unless Jahmyr Gibbs really corners the red zone opportunities, the goal line opportunities when it comes to the Lions, which I don't think is going to happen, that's going to cap the touchdown ceilings of Jahmyr Gibbs. So even if I guess that Jahmyr Gibbs is going to have like 1,200 yards rushing and we can get him up to like 700 yards receiving, like, and that's hard because now we're talking about like cannibalizing Laporta and the Sun God at that point, probably also David Montgomery. We can do that. It's still going to cap some way, shape, or form his touchdown ceiling, unless he just like they're just like, yeah, you get all the good stuff. Like unless we're getting like this Alvin Kamara type season where like we're just not worried about some of those opportunities. Like this is within the range of opportunity or outcomes for Jahmyr Gibbs. That's something that has to be talked about to begin with when it comes down to it. Now, do I think that's likely? No. And that's why I generally not be targeting Jahmyr Gibbs at his price. Now, 15 overall, I do like. And then on Fantasy Pros, I think this is the problem I start running into with these guys is some of these guys probably like 13 overall. That's okay. It's not quite as good as I would like it to be because, I think middle of the range of outcomes, you may not be quite getting what I would like to get. But yeah, that road is there when it comes to him. Now, the other guy to talk about this in this range, Isaiah Pacheco. This gets a little interesting. It's okay. He's okay at 16 overall. He becomes like very, very interesting going down here at 34 overall on Fantasy Pros. So like some of these guys, like again, you got to know your league and what rankings your league uses, because here's a guy not going to get design receiving work in this offense. He may not be the red zone guy in this offense. They have Kelsey depending on the Rashee Rice situation, but he's going to be the bell cow in this offense, and it is projecting to be a good offense. So he may be, limited, imperfect from what we want from a fantasy football perspective. He's the guy that's going to get the 20 to 20 opportunities in a projected good offense. And he's going to get limited red zone opportunities, but he's going to get a lot of limited red zone opportunities because they're going to be attached to good offense. And he may not get design receiving work, but he's going to be the check down monster attached to a good offense. Like, again, if he's going at like 33 overall, and this is what's going to be a little bit more difficult for me to predict because this is going to be heavily based off your league, this discrepancy between running back or 16 overall and 34 overall, like I have a hard time understanding because of what Isaiah Pacheco could be as a pure imperfect bell cow attached to a good offense. All right. Travis Etienne, and I'm just going to say this, like he's fine. Like the offense projects to be in that okay to good range. They did disappoint last year. The other thing I would say with Travis Etienne is last year, I could bring this one up, is his overall efficiency did go down as the season went down. I'm a little concerned with Tank Bigsby and Ernest Johnson eating into him slightly, but primarily I'm concerned with this inefficiency in the rushing game that he has. Now, he's going to have half of what we want. He's going to get that receiving work. He's going to get that design receiving work. I am also a little bit concerned with Travis Etienne that with Brian Thomas Jr. coming in, Gabe Davis coming in, you have Christian Kirk, you have Evan Ingram at the 140 targets that Evan Ingram had last year. Like Travis Etienne, that 73 targets that he had last year, like I don't know if we can necessarily project that he's going to get that 73 targets again. And that's part of what makes Travis Etienne valuable is that receiving work, that design receiving work, that efficient receiving work that he got. Now, he also has 11 rushing touchdowns. That may stay consistent. But we actually just generally need more touchdowns. He has to hit again, magically find a way to get about like 3 more touchdowns, and then he has to become more efficient in the rushing game. That's the part that like probably bothers me overall with him. Again, he's just going to be fine, and then it just becomes an issue of price. So on ESPN, where he's going to bring this one back up, on ESPN where he's going like 21 overall, running back 9, like that's fair. I'm not going to say it's not. And then it just becomes an issue like, can I guarantee he's going to be there like 16 overall, running back 7? Now I don't like that. At that point, like you're buying a ceiling more than you're buying a floor. I generally like to buy floors. All right, this one. So Derrick Henry and Alvin Kamara, I'm just going to take off my board, and for 2 reasons. Derrick Henry, you got age, and then he's going to get a little bit of vulturing in the red zone because of Lamar Jackson and probably Mark Andrews. So like, there's a lot of things I would just generally say like someone else's problem, especially at the cost of running back 10 overall. Alvin Kamara, I'm going to take off my board because of the age and the potential looming competition from Kendre Miller in what projects to be like an okay offense. So like, they can be someone else's problems. It's not even it's not even necessarily a matter of price. I do think that they're both overvalued, but for me to appropriately value them in a draft, if they magically fall to me, like it's never going to happen where like I'm like, okay, I'll take a shot at them at like pick 50. I'm never going to get Derrick Henry and Alvin Kamara at pick 50. That's where they should be going because of the story that we could already tell with them overall. Joe Mixon, I really like Joe Mixon. At 24, I think it's okay. You know, you're looking at like the opportunities funnel attached to what is looking like a good offense. Even though he's 28, they did re-sign him. There is not a lot of competition. I'm not really worried about like Damian Pierce or Dare, whatever. The biggest thing is like I'm just looking at a guy that's going to get a lot of red zone opportunities, and that's why when I bring up is it this one last year, like just general running opportunities in the red zone, like yeah, I want pieces of that. If he can get up there where he's having like the Gus Bus ability to fall into an end zone 13 times because he gets 39 red zone carries, like I'm okay with that. Like if I get that. And the other thing with a Joe Mixon, and I'm bringing this up over here, the other thing with a Joe Mixon, he's always kind of been involved with the receiving game. That's why he's had value in the past. So now he's going to go to an offense that does project to be higher volume passing, and he's going to get either the probably more of the check down monster work than like design passing work, I would say at this point in his career. But that receiving work, even if it's the low efficiency receiving work, is going to be there for Joe Mixon, plus the opportunity to fall in the end zone a whole bunch of times. Like, yeah. And then it just becomes an issue of price. So over here on ESPN, where he's going, you're running back 12, like, yeah, I could get running back 12 or better with injuries. And then the other thing is like fantasy pros, and this is where it becomes like real interesting for Joe Mixon, where he's going 44 overall. So yeah, like 4th round draft pick with the ability to maybe get this really ugly RB1. Yeah, okay, I'll take that. That's not very hard for me to think about. And again, this is going to be relatively based on price. So in auction leagues, Joe Mixon is going to be really interesting versus price. In snake draft leagues, again, you're going to have to know your league. ESPN league, like, yeah, okay, it's a punt. It's probably a relatively safe punt. You know, obviously, if you have like a fantasy pros league, this is a guy that you may potentially be able to go up a little bit and go get. Now, Rachaad White here, this is going to be one of those guys that like we can tell the story where he has a legendary season. And the only thing that I've gotten a little bit more bearish when it comes to Rachaad White is the expectation that we're going to get this like magical increase of magical step forward with the Buccaneers offense. And that means I have to pinch my nose and expect that Baker Mayfield does not turn back into a pumpkin this year. I don't know how much I really want to be doing that. But the price to potentially have a legendary upside season, well, that becomes a different type of story. And to bring this back up right here with Rachaad White, if he gets this receiving work, and I've heard some people talk about Rachaad White where they talk about like the ridiculously high efficiency of the 70 targets, 64 receptions. Like, yeah, are we looking at that going down? Sure. We could also get just more general volume of targets, so he could get there either way. I would generally go like maybe we can guess on some type of regression in the receiving work. We're not going to get a lot of regression or negative regression. We may get that. The other thing is like they spent on an offensive line. As long as Baker Mayfield is not like just horrible and he can get red zone opportunities, they didn't bring in competition. So we can get a slight negative regression in receiving work, but we're also projecting to get a slight positive regression in the rushing game. So like we could get like 1,200 yards rushing if he gets 10 touchdowns to go along with the 400 yards receiving. We still get an RB1, and then it just becomes an issue of price shopping. So on ESPN, where he's going like 25 overall, yeah, I have the possibility of an elite or legendary range of outcomes player. Why can I say he's going to have a legendary range of outcomes? Because he's going to get that design receiving work. That's just how he's used. So he's perfect in that regard. It just becomes an issue of like how much more rushing work and touchdowns I can get out of a guy at the price that he's going. Now, 25 overall, that's a good pick. You know what's a really great pick to get a guy who has that legendary to elite range of outcomes, where he's going at 38 overall in Fantasy Pros. That's why I like it. Now, bearish me being is how much better I think this Tampa Bay offense is going to be. That's what bothers me a little bit more. So I don't know how much I would be overspending on him, but he would be in this range of guys when I start looking at running backs and I go, well, who can win me a league? Rachaad White can win me a league in a way that like some of these other guys like a Michael Pittman, Mike Evans can't do. And then we start talking about like your Sam Laportas and your Travis Kelce. So this guy is on my short list. It just becomes an issue of price when it comes down to it. Now, James Cook, again, design receiving work attached to a good offense. It becomes an issue of how much red zone opportunity he's going to get. And there may end up being two guys that are going to eat into him. Josh Allen, he's the Bills' de facto fullback, 15 rushing touchdowns last year at quarterback, which I am expecting to have a negative regression on. Ray Davis, they bring in as the 4th round draft pick. I really like Ray Davis. And this becomes the issue. Like, I think the last rankings I did, I had James Cook at running back 7. If I hear that Ray Davis is what we're already hearing Ray Davis is, like, James Cook just comes off my board. Like, I'm just not interested. He can be someone else's problem, because now we're getting into that 50-50 timeshare where James Cook is going to have a very imperfect road. He may get design receiving work, but he ain't going to get the red zone opportunity. And that's going to make it really interesting. So now we might end up getting like last year's Gibbs and Montgomery. And at that point, I'm going to take Montgomery all day because of the cost of Ray Davis right now, 173 on ESPN. All right. So I like 2 of these 3 guys. I dislike one of these guys. Josh Jacobs, 31 overall, running back 15. On Fantasy Pros, he is going to go. I like Josh Jacobs better, I think, on Fantasy Pros. Let's see if I can hunt him down. 39 overall. So relatively the same range. This is going to be another guy that's just going to be attached to a good offense. And that means that like he's going to have a lot of opportunities to score. The other thing is what they paid Josh Jacobs, $12 million a year. So you're looking at like a top 5 running back when it comes to what they're paying him, even though they brought in Marshawn Lloyd right here at 165, running back 165. I don't know if this is necessarily going to be Marshawn Lloyd's year. I could definitely say that Marshawn Lloyd is going to eat into the ceiling of Josh Jacobs, but this is an offense that projects to be good with a lot of red zone opportunities. Josh Jacobs can be involved in the design receiving game, but, and there's another caveat behind this with the but, is there's a lot of mouths to feed in that Green Bay offense. So when it comes down to Josh Jacobs, like what I like about him is just generally cost. 31 to 39, somewhere in that area, to get a guy that has the road to finish as 1,500 yards from scrimmage and like 10 to 15 touchdowns. Yeah, it's there. So like, I'm not going to overthink this. So just generally looking at these guys, like this range from the strategy standpoint of this channel, once CMC, Brees, and Bijan go off the board, I'm heavily looking at going after these wide receivers, wide receiver 1 through wide receiver 8, before I would even think about like Jahmyr Gibbs and Isaiah Pacheco. Isaiah Pacheco and Jahmyr Gibbs are probably safer plays. They're punts relative to Devontae Adams' age, Chris Olave, he's limited, and Michael Pittman, Mike Evans. So like Gibbs and Pacheco would have more value to me. Now this range of guys with ETN, Henry, Kamara, Mixon, White, and Cook, I would take Rachaad White over these guys because of upside, even though I will acknowledge Joe Mixon and Travis Etienne probably are safer plays in this range, right? I'm going to take Laporta, Kelce, Josh Allen and Jalen Hurts off my board because of cost, because I'm expecting the rushing regression on Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, and Sam Laporta and Kelsey, I think, are flawed guys this year. So I can get that position someplace else. I don't have to overspend on a premium pick. So that would put your Josh Jacobs and your Devon Achains on the board. Now, again, remember your league and the rankings of your league, because Marvin Harrison and Drake London are likely to be up here a lot higher than they're going. I think Drake London is going to go about like 15 overall, and Marvin Harrison is going to be like shortly behind that. So there's two other guys that would be in this area, and I would be interested in Marvin Harrison and Drake London at their price. Now, the other guy, Devin Achane, this is a guy that's going to be attached to a good offense. He's going to have a lot of red zone opportunities. He's going to be in what projects to be some type of 50-50 split with either Raheem Mostert, the fourth round pick, Jalen Wright. They have Jeff Wilson. There's going to be a lot of opportunity, or a lot of competition for opportunity there. This would be a guy that is going to have the week-to-week ability to win you that week. That's why I would like Devin Achane. I would also acknowledge from a fantasy football perspective how math and statistics and probability work. He could just get lucky and fall in the end zone a lot more times and be very efficient. He was ridiculously efficient. We can generally guess that this efficiency may go down, but it's still going to stay like really efficient. 7.7 yards per carry, 5.3 yards per reception. Now, yards per target. Now, in this case, I could definitely see that the receiving work goes up. We want receiving work. We don't really care about the rushing work. We just want the receiving work to go up and the touchdowns to go up. So if he's attached to a good offense, he's going to have more red zone opportunity. And then if he just gets more receiving work, I don't really care how the yards break down in general. If he gets to about like 1,400 yards because he's able to stay healthy, and he did miss a lot of time last year. So in general, this would be a guy in this range that I would like, because I do think he's appropriately valued. And to go over to our fantasy pros, where we'll see where he's going. If he goes too high, and this is my one critique on Achane, he's going 36 overall in fantasy pros with the ECR. My big critique on Achane is I think in a lot of leagues, he's going to end up going like a round earlier than where he should go, because outside of getting that unpredictable like coin flip of fantasy where he's the guy that actually ends up scoring all the time, and then like Mostert or Wright or Wilson ends up being like Tony Pollard, you're not going to get that ability to have that like elite or sub-elite type of season. And unless the distribution happens correctly, you're going to have weeks where he did, and I could bring this up because I already brought him up, you're going to get like what he did in week 15 and 16, where he does like 7.7, 3.6, and then he has that spike week in the finals. So like as an RB2, this league winning RB2, absolutely at the price. Like as an RB1, it becomes like really hard to tell that story about how he get there, even though he's got the talent and he's attached to the offense to do it. All right. Kenneth Walker, he's going 32 overall. I like him slightly better on Fantasy Pros, where he is going 47 overall. In general, I would just take him off my board. He could be someone else's problem. Again, this is not an issue of talent. That's not what we're here to discuss as a fantasy football channel. When it comes to Kenneth Walker, I am expecting a 50-50 timeshare with last year's second round pick, Zach Charbonnet, because at the end of the season, you know what they were doing? Well, they were involved with a 50-50 timeshare last year with the Seattle Seahawks. So this offense projects, like you see the last two games of the season, 57% snaps, 53% snaps when it comes to Charbonnet. And I can bring up Kenneth Walker if you're wondering, and we could discuss about at the end of the season, 43% snaps, 49% snaps. It's going to be 50-50. I would rather have Zach Charbonnet, because if there's a guy that's going to get the check down work in this offense, bring him right here. If there's a guy that's going to get the check down work in this offense, it's Charbonnet. If there's a guy that's going to get the goal line work in this offense, it's probably going to be Charbonnet. Kenneth Walker, I think is fine. I think he's special, but he may get the design receiving work, and he may get a lot of the red zone work, even though I like Charbonnet is going to get the goal line work. So guessing on these two guys, and this is why I would bring up our shares of Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren. These guys should be compressed together. There's a lot of similarities to say that the Seattle Seahawks are not going to be good. They're going to be okay. And these two guys are going to be in 50-50 splits, and they're going to get imperfect touches when it comes to the two type of opportunities we want, red zone work and receiving work. Why there's this massive gulf between the two of those guys, I would rather take Zach Charbonnet. And again, not talking about handcuffs, but if there's a Kenneth Walker injury, Zach Charbonnet wins me a league. Now, if Kenneth Walker goes or Zach Charbonnet goes down, do I think Kenneth Walker can win me a league? No, because I think he's flawed in a way that Zach Charbonnet's not when it comes to football ability. They probably would bring someone else in to take some of that dirty work away from Kenneth Walker, and that's going to generally cap his upside. So you may get a solid RB2. I don't know if you're going to get a league winner when it comes to Kenneth Walker, especially if he's going 32 overall. 47 overall, hey, you can have Adder at that range, but this big white block on ESPN, and this white block is somewhat generally consistent on Fantasy Pro. So once your Joe Mixon goes off the board, this is where I would be attacking your Anthony Richardsons, your Mark Andrews, your Trey McBrides, your Terry McLaurin's, and your Kyler Murray before we start talking about Ramondre Stevenson. So this block, which is larger on ESPN, is still there on the ECR, and that's where these guys have their nice fine picks, their punts, but there are other guys that have league winning upside to me going in this range. All right. So 65 Ramondre, I just talked about him, special video for him. He just signed a $9 million a year contract with the Patriots. This may not be a good offense. They do project to be better, which is really all I need at 65 overall. 65 overall is what he's going on Fantasy Pros. So now all I have to necessarily look at is the ability for the offense to take enough of a step forward that Ramondre can score some more touchdowns. And, at 65 overall, if I'm wrong and I get like this really ugly RB2, he's not gonna stop me from winning leagues. If I'm right on Ramondre, I get a very good RB2, a high end RB2, or maybe a low end RB1, something along those lines. I definitely like that. So the difference in cost when it comes to Ramondre and Antonio Gibson at this rate, that they're paying Ramondre 2.4 times the amount they're paying Antonio Gibson. They're from a real life football perspective, they're paying Antonio Gibson high end RB2 money. What they're paying Ramondre is from a real life football perspective, they're paying him RB1 money. So if he's not valued as an RB1, I should be targeting him in my drafts, even if the offense isn't good, because the Patriots did enough that now I can actually project out the story where the Patriots go from the third worst passing offense or the third worst offense to this Tampa Bay Buccaneers type of range of outcomes. And if they get a little bit better, that just means more red zone opportunities for Ramondre Stevenson. There's a better chance he's going to win me a league at the price he's going at. Now, Ramondre would be one of these guys that I could definitely see that people are going to realize that he's inappropriately valued, and he might get a little bit of hype train coming up out of the contract he just signed. I'm going to take a sip of water here. All right, Aaron Jones, he's going to come off my board because of age, and I'm expecting that he is going to be in some type of timeshare with Ty Chandler this year, or opportunity share with Ty Chandler. Also, not really sure what to think of the offense in general when it comes to the Vikings. Sam Darnold right now is taking first team reps. The first round draft pick, JJ McCarthy. Like, I don't know when he's gonna take over. And in general, like, this is not something that there's so much uncertainty. I don't know how to guess right. And if I'm going to guess at all when it comes to this offense, I'm going to take the cheaper guy, Ty Chandler. Jonathan Brooks, normally a guy I would take off my board. This is another one of those things where it's like, know your league and know the rankings they're going to use. 66 overall, okay. We're going to talk a little bit more about Jonathan Brooks when I get to Chuba Hubbard. But in general, like, he would be a guy second half of the year that I could see being a top 10 running back. He's going to have the ability to get like design passing work. It just becomes an issue of how much better the offense is and when they're done ramping him up. I could definitely see by the end of the year, they're going to be expecting to see what they have next year when it comes to Jonathan Brooks and Bryce Young. So like those weeks, those special weeks, like the fantasy playoffs, I'm going to get into my playoffs. Like, I could definitely see having value when it comes to Jonathan Brooks. 66 overall, I like that. When I go over to Fantasy Pros, he's like 102 in this range. So like 105 overall on Fantasy Pros. Like I like that a lot better. Now he just generally becomes like a lottery ticket in the bottom of my bench. When it comes to this ESPN league, this is the range where I would be looking to roll him out as a flex to start the season off. It gets a little bit like tougher to do that, or like an RB2. So that's what, like, there's a little bit more involved with a guy that I have to project out. Um, that may be a little bit too pricey for some of you out there in this range. To get a guy that does have league winning outcome, I would take that, because there's going to be so few guys left on the board at this point that are going to be able to do that. All right, DeAndre Swift right now, he's not draftable to me, because of the running back by committee going on with the Bears. So he's going to have parts of what we want. He's attached to what projects to be not a bad offense. We don't know how good the offense is going to be for the Bears. He could get design passing work attached to this offense. He could be the design, or he could be the check down monster in this offense. Also, he probably would project to get the 20 to 20, a lot of the 20 to 20 work when it comes out of this. He's going to be right now in some type of timeshare with Khalil Herbert. They paid him $8 million. I find it very hard to believe that they're going to really lean on Khalil Herbert if they paid $8 million to DeAndre Swift. So this is why, like, if Khalil Herbert makes the or stays on the team, like I have no idea how to touch this backfield. Like, yes, $8 million a year attached to what projects to be a good offense with receiving work. Normally at running back 21, I'd be like, yes, please. But in this case, like, how much work that Roshan is going to take and how much work Khalil Herbert's going to take, I have no idea. And going back to a Barkley, if you're not getting the right work, it doesn't matter. If DeAndre Swift isn't the goal line back, if that's what Roshan or Khalil Herbert is, or even in this case, if it's the rookie Caleb Williams, like, you're getting this really flawed RB2, and it's really hard to dig out of that hole, even if the Bears are paying him $8 million a year, because they may generally be paying him to not score touchdowns, which may generate real life success for the Bears. It's just not a fantasy a story I can tell with DeAndre Swift at the price that he's going. So, like, in general, I would have to price shop this, and it becomes like really hard to appropriately value this, because it's like it's all those ifs and buts and maybes. Where is he going? 73 overall, like that's in line with where he's going on ESPN. Like, I don't know how I win on this. Like, it's a coin flip, and I don't like necessarily drafting coin flips. If I can't tell the story ahead of time, like, yeah, this happens, then that happens. I spent pick 71. I can do that. It doesn't hurt. It doesn't hurt my team. But I can also tell the story about how, like, there's another guy in this area that can potentially win leagues for me. So anyway, James Conner with the Cardinals, he does project to be the red zone guy attached to what would be a good offense. Not going to get design receiving work. He's going to be the thumper. They brought in rookie. Where's he at? Trey Benson. They brought Trey Benson in from Florida. I don't think Trey Benson is quite the football player that James Conner is. In general, Trey Benson probably has the ability in the second half to win leagues in a way that James Conner does not. So with James Conner, I would just generally take him off my board because of age, and that, like, the age and the potential possibility that he's going to get eaten into from some perspective, uh, because of the rookie. And in this case, like, what I'm buying the most when it comes to James Conner is going to be his ability to fall into the end zone attached to, like, what looks like an okay to good offense. That's not a bad road to go. But again, like, this is a punt. And I think punts are fine. And, like, just so with DeAndre Swift, like, there's not value when it comes to DeAndre Swift and James Conner. At this point in my draft, and I encourage you to run your roster the way that you want. This is where I would be attacking my Dalton Kincaids and my Kyler Murrays. Maybe I get lucky and Anthony Richardson falls to me, like, right now, and Anthony Richardson is not going to be in this range, but there will be other guys that I would be looking at, and there are still targets that I have that I think are cleaner when it comes to telling the story about how I get to where I need to get to. Now, Brian Robinson Jr., I'm just going to say, like, I'm not generally interested. They signed Austin Eckler. They still have Chris Rodriguez. In general, I think he's fine. He's going to be flirting with RB2 land like he did last year. Uh, More than likely, I expect the offense to be better. It's just become an issue like, how do we get Brian Robinson to that 1,500 yards, like 15 touchdowns? The design receiving work, he's probably not going to get. He may get the check down monster work. But they have Austin Eckler. And the two things with Austin Eckler hits for the Redskins is going to be the goal line work and the design receiving work that Brian Robinson is not going to get. So you may get this year's David Montgomery. Like that may occur. That's why he's not off my board. It's just one of those guys that like I don't know how he wins leagues. And then we see David Montgomery right there, right after that. Which David Montgomery does project to be a part of a better offense. When I bring up David Montgomery, I'd like him less going at 59 overall on Fantasy Pros. That's probably closer to where he's going to go. David Montgomery, in a way that Brian Robinson Jr. can't do, B-Rob can't do, is David Montgomery has the ability to win leagues if Jahmyr Gibbs goes down, in a way that Brian Robinson does not have the ability to win leagues if Austin Eckler goes down, because I still think that Chris Rodriguez is going to be part of this offense in a particular manner. I can actually bring up Chris Rodriguez. So this is what bothers me the most with this backfield is this little bit of run that they gave Chris Rodriguez last year, and he was a little bit efficient. So if the new coaching staff is like, yeah, we just don't like Chris Rodriguez, whatever, then it doesn't matter. But if he's part of this offense in any way, it's going to cut into the theoretical upside of Brian B-Rob or Eckler, even if Eckler's not broken. And that bothers me a little bit more. Like, the offense has to be better. How do these guys? How do these guys get to the points that they're at? Like, this is not a story that we can tell with David Montgomery. If Jahmyr Gibbs goes down, David Montgomery is probably going to be a bell cow, and he may not get quite the amount of design receiving work, but he's going to get all the red zone opportunity attached to a good offense. And there's enough there to go like, so I get this ugly RB2 theoretically that has the ability to fall in the end zone a whole bunch of times. And we can go back to James Conner when we talk about like his 2021 season where he did 750 yards rushing, but he fell in the end zone 15 times. So you could still get that type of season with David Montgomery. Again, all the stars align in the right direction for you in a way that you're probably not going to be able to get that when it comes to Brian Robinson Jr., B-Rob. So that's why I would like David Montgomery at 74. I like him less at 59 because, again, that would be the range that I'd be looking at. My Trey McBrides or my Anthony Richardsons or something along those lines to go up and get David Montgomery where he should be valued. Now, Najee and Jalen Warren, just going to start off, like, this offense does project to be better. You're trying to guess which of the coin flip that you want to guess on to be a league winner if the other one goes down. Najee is going to be the check down monster. He's likely going to be the goal line guy. Jalen Warren is going to be the design receiver that is going to be the guy that's going to probably get more of the work, I would guess, inside the 20. This is probably not an offense that's going to have a lot of red zone opportunity, though I expect them to be relatively in the okay category. So I would not be surprised when it comes from a fantasy perspective that the Steelers jump from the bottom third to the middle of the pack, which is going to generally create more opportunities for Najee and Jalen Warren. All right. So when these two guys come up, like at the prices they're going at, it's a coin flip. I'm not generally interested. I don't even think at the prices these guys are going at that I can buy the backfield and just like hope that I'm right. And I can bring up Fantasy Pros. We already talked about these guys where Najee is going like 70 and Jalen Warren's going like 85. Like maybe in very specific builds, like your zero running back type of builds that like I'm just going to buy the Steelers backfield. Maybe I could do something like that in like a Fantasy Pros type league and hope. If I were to throw a dart at these two guys, it would probably be Jalen Warren may have the better chance to win leagues if Najee Harris goes down, because Jalen Warren is the better athlete. He's going to have the ability to have quote unquote the higher explosive plays. So if I had to pick between the two of those guys, Zamir White stays on my board, and I'm actually going to bring up Josh Jacobs to talk about Zamir White. And I'm not going to talk about Josh Jacobs because they were both on the Raiders because this is a new staff. The reason why I'm going to bring up Josh Jacobs is his 2022 season attached to what was a not good Raiders offense, where Josh Jacobs was just this opportunity funnel where he had 340 carries and another 64 targets. And Zamir White is a better athlete than Josh Jacobs. So Josh Jacobs had 12 rushing touchdowns. He had no receiving touchdowns. This would be Zamir White's ceiling if he's just this massive bell cow when it comes to the Raiders this year. And it's not because they were both on the Raiders, to repeat myself. It's just because we can tell the story between Dylan Labe, Alexander Madison, and Amir Abdullah that they are just like, nope, he's Josh Jacobs. He's going to get like 80% snaps. And I can bring this up so we can talk about this 2022 season where he's getting this like 80% snaps. And when he's on the field, the whole focal point of the offense is getting the football to Zamir White. Like, yeah, I could tell that story. He's going at a range where if I'm wrong, I get this really ugly RB2, but he's even going outside of ugly RB2 range when he's going running back 27-77 all overall. On Fantasy Pros, he's going closer to what he should be valued at, 69 overall, running back 22. But again, where he should actually be valued, the like guys like Ramondre and Zamir White, they should probably be closer to this dead zone that exists on ESPN. This big white dead zone between 34 and 64. On Fantasy Pros, where Zamir White should be valued is closer to where Joe Mixon is at running back 15. Like you could get this massive opportunity funnel season attached to like an okay or not a good offense. And because of how much volume he gets with the little red zone opportunity there's going to be, he's just going to be the only guy who gets the opportunity. He's going to score touchdowns. Like that's part of the reason why I'm so down on Devontae Adams and Brock Bowers is they just may not throw the football ever. And they're just going to give it to Zamir White 20 times a game like they did last year. And, it's really hard to tell the story where in some magical world, to bring the wrong White up, the magical world where he's getting, 20 touches a game, 25 touches a game that he can't return in some way, shape, or form in RB2 land, even if he's attached to a bad offense. That's why, like, in general, I still have to target him because of how much opportunity he's going to get, because he's going at a range that is outside of his ability to hurt me if I'm wrong on him. All right. So there's another dead zone on ESPN 78 to 95. This dead zone is somewhat consistent. So you see Ramondre, Zamir White goes off the board, and then it just becomes an issue like, where are the next guys that I'm interested in? Maybe Pollard. There's Jalen Warren if you're into that. Javonte, I'm not. Zach Moss is going to be a little interesting. So there are some guys in this dead zone, but in general, you're going to see a similar dead zone more than likely in most of your drafts that we do have to discuss. So this would be where I would be attacking certain guys. ESPN, Terry McLaurin would be very high up there for me. Your Kyle Pitts, like these type of guys would be there for me. So I probably would not be attacking running back at this point to be looking ahead of time. Now, on ESPN, 96 to 103, you get another block of running backs going off the board. That's still relatively consistent on Fantasy Pros. Again, there's your Tony Pollards to go down the line. Tajay Spears. Zeke, I think, is a little like appropriately valued where he's going at. But again, there are other guys I would be targeting in this range. So to be able to appropriately go like, who are the league winners? And in a lot of leagues, what makes this ESPN rankings interesting is you are going to get runs on positions in your drafts. If you've been doing it enough times, it's going to happen. And, guys are going to be going off board. In auction leagues, you're going to have runs that go on in a different way because players or guys in leagues, in auction leagues, are going to realize that they missed out on a position and they're going to overspend on a guy because they're running out of opportunities to get guys that I think have certain values. Generally, you should not panic and you should just go like, I will just allow you to give me a whole bunch of lottery tickets for cheap. But that's not what generally people do. They will panic. So the next run on running backs will probably cause a run on running backs that would go in a block like this in the draft. So Javonte Williams, I think the offense projects to be not good. They may be okay, but they're not going to be good. But he's also going to be in this massive running back by committee with Jaleel McLaughlin. They have Austin Esteme that they brought in, the 5th round draft pick, and they have Samaje Perine. Javonte Williams is already flawed as a prospect from a fantasy perspective because he's slow. So even if he gets the red zone work attached to an okay offense, he's not going to have your quote unquote explosive plays. And He's not going to probably be the guy that's in the design receiving game. He's going to be the check down monster. So he just becomes this like really ugly road to maybe RB2 land at price. Like he's okay if you can guess that he is going to be the 60% guy. And I don't even know if we can necessarily go that far to say that he's going to do that. He was not particularly efficient last year. And there's nothing to say that he's going to end up being efficient this year. Last year, 3.57 coming off injury. A lot of competition in that backfield. Last year of his deal, like probably, in my opinion, should be someone else's problem. All right. Tajay Spears, Tony Pollard. These guys project to be 50-50 timeshare. They did pay Tony Pollard $7.2 million a year. That would be the guy that if I had to guess is going to be like 60-40. It's going to be with Tony Pollard. Very inefficient attached to the Cowboys last year when it comes to red zone opportunity. But he would be the guy that I would suspect to get the red zone opportunity if it's not Will Levis. And that becomes the elephant in the room when it comes to Tennessee, that if they decide to turn Will Levis into like hairband Josh Allen to rip off underdog again, I probably don't want any of these guys. They are both going to be guys that could be in the design receiving game and check down monsters in a 50-50 timeshare. Where they become really interesting to me is I can get two guys that are going to get 50% of the team's backfield receiving work in a way that the Steelers guys don't project to be in that Arthur Smith offense. So now it just becomes an issue of price. And at 80 overall with Tony Pollard, like that's okay. That's where he's going on Fantasy Pros. And then Tajay Spears is going to be the cheaper guy out of the bunch. I can look this up. I think I wrote it down. Tajay Spears going 106 overall, like maybe. And then if we are getting 50-50 timeshares and we can't really guess on the red zone usage between the two guys, probably go to the cheaper one. But again, like I don't know, like outside of an injury, which one of these guys are going to necessarily win leagues. Maybe they should be someone else's problem. The one thing that I will talk about when it comes to like certain backfields, like the Steelers or the Titans, is because we're projecting them to be 50-50 splits. If it looks like, because we're going to talk about the Bengals here in a second, if it looks like one of the guys is the guy, that's the guy that I'm going to go like over trade for if you have a league where trading is available. So that I would do that in general. Moving on to Zach Moss, he's going to be sort of the safer pick out of the two. This is going to be the Chase Brown, Zach Moss argument. And I am slowly but surely leaning towards either buying the backfield or going for Chase or Zach Moss. I don't know how the backfield is going to shake out between the two of those guys. I imagine the design receiving work may go to Chase Brown. I've seen some of the stats that said like Chase Brown wasn't even used on third down. Maybe it's Zach Moss. I would be leaning towards Zach Moss in general. But the upside of Chase Brown, who's better athletically, is tough. I would generally think this is going to be like somewhere in the line of like a 60-40 split, and getting last year's Joe Mixon is what everybody's been talking about. And I do think that would be the better way to look at it when it comes to Zach Moss, that you're going to have a guy that's going to have the ability to fall into the end zone like 10 to 15 times. Probably going to be the smarter play out of the two. The safer play, if you want the full, hey, we're going to go find Kyron, it's Chase Brown. And he's going 122 on Fantasy Pros. He is going 122 also. So that would be the guy to go after when it comes to these two. The offense does project to be in the good to elite category. So like buying a piece at the price that they're going at, both inappropriately valued. And again, I bring this up that when we're looking at why is Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren going higher. So Zach Moss is going, they're paying him $4 million a year. Zach Moss is going 89 overall. Zach Moss is going 89 overall on Fantasy Pros. B-Rob is going 88 ahead of him. Brian Robinson is going 73. So why would I spend on Brian Robinson in that story when I can go spend on 99 Zach Moss or 89 Zach Moss to potentially get last year's Joe Mixon? And remember, the bar for running back one is usually like 1,500 yards and 15 touchdowns. So Joe Mixon last year, 1,000 yards rushing, 376 yards receiving, 12 total touchdowns, but I'm potentially spending pick 99 on him. Now, that $4 million price tag does bother me because of the fact that if Chase Brown is the guy, because they just generally didn't pay Zach Moss. And that's why like the Ramondre signing makes a big deal. because we know what these guys are worth. The Patriots view their RB2 to be worth about like $250,000 less than what the Bengals are paying Zach Moss to be. Now, it doesn't necessarily, the logic doesn't necessarily work out that way, but from a fantasy perspective, the cost that I put in does. All right. Devin Singletary, this projects to be a bad offense for the Giants. This would be a guy that I'm not going to spend too much time talking about. He does project as a bell cow $5.5 million a year right now, but they also have Eric Gray, who's a better athlete, second-year guy, and they brought in Tyrone Tracy, who was very interesting as a prospect, converted wide receiver. So right now, I would be more interested in waiting on Tyrone Tracy news and Eric Gray news than spending on athletically limited Devin Singletary that got like high-end RB2 money or very ugly RB1 money when it comes down to being attached to a bad offense. If he's the guy, and we're going to talk a little bit more about this when it comes to like guys like Chuba Hubbard and Deonta Foreman. If he's the guy that's just generally going to get volume, even if it's attached to the bad offense, he is going outside of the range that he's going to be able to return on investment at 101 overall on Fantasy Pros. And I think I have him written down someplace. Maybe I didn't. He's still going relatively cheap. These would be the guys like in your certain builds that you're just like, oh, I'm just going to take the volume and take my ball and go home. I don't even have him written down right now. I'm kind of falling out of in love with him. The more that I listen to some of the other channels and they talk about how good Eric Gray is doing in camp, the more that makes me think that Eric Gray may end up being Kyron Williams, and I would be rather spending on Eric Gray. If it's not Eric Gray, it may be Tyrone Tracy Jr., and Tyrone Tracy Jr. may be second half of the season. On top of all that, it just may be generally not a good offense. All right, took a sip of water there. Let's see, where are we at? Nick Chubb, he's off my board because of injury. J.K. Dobbins, he's going to be off the board because of injury. We'll talk about Gus Bus. This is another one. I'm more interested in Kimani Vidal, the fifth-round pick for the Chargers. The Chargers are going to be an offense that does project to run downhill. The Greg Roman offense that Harbaugh brought in back when he was attached to Lamar Jackson and the Ravens, they didn't, Lamar Jackson didn't throw to the running backs. We want guys that get thrown to. Gus Bus, that may not be his wheelhouse. Vidal was okay, like on tape when he was used that way. I don't know how much design receiving work you're going to get out of that. If Gus Bus is the guy, he would be going, in that range of this, the ability to fall in what projects to be like not a bad offense. To bring up James Conner again, another guy that you're looking at like falling in the end zone 15 times. And then the biggest thing is like, if you just get the guy, and this is what his role was last year with the Ravens, and his role was before that under Greg Roman, is just the ability to fall into the end zone. And there's going to be a certain amount of price with that. So right now with Gus Edwards, not a guy that I'm uninterested in, but I want to find out, does J.K. Dobbins make the roster? J.K. Dobbins only has $50 million guaranteed. So like, I don't think he's going to make the roster. I don't know even if he does, how healthy he's going to be. That's why like Vidal is the guy that may have that league winning upside right now. But if Gus Bus at the price that they paid him if he's the guy, like he's the guy, and that's going to have a lot more interest to me down the line. Right now, at this stage, like I can't really say one way or another. Zach Charbonnet I already talked about. I would be expecting him to get 50-50 split. There's a better chance that he's going to get the valuable touches because he's the guy, the bigger guy, the better football player. Like Kenneth Walker is just the better athlete. He's very inefficient. If they just want a guy to run into the back of an offensive line and fall into the end zone, it may be Zach Charbonnet. So there's a lot more value when it comes to Zach Charbonnet. Unfortunately, and I'll talk about this block of guys right here, this would be the guys that I would be missing out on because there would be guys that I would be throwing my darts at to win leagues in ways that I don't know if any of these guys can win leagues. So like going after the Devontae Williams block of guys, maybe outside of Zach Moss, who may project to be like an ugly league winner. There's a certain point where like I'm going to go after like my Lad McConkeys and my Brian Thomas Jr.'s, my Jaden Daniels. These would be the guys that I think are ugly and have ugly enough roads that I just don't know how much I will be getting relative to the guys that I think have better ways to get me there. So Antonio Gibson, Because of the Ramondre signing, the road for Antonio Gibson to win leagues is going to be heavily based off being a handcuff, and that's if the offense is better. So I would generally kind of stay away from that. Tyler Algier, like if you're a Bijan owner attached to what this offense is going to be, Tyler Algier can be a check down monster. He can be a pass blocker. You know, serviceable running back. You know, would be a priority handcuff. This is a guy towards the end of the year that should be rostered in all leagues. He has the ability to win when it matters in the playoffs. Right now, I don't know if he's necessarily draftable outside of like playing it safe. Jerome Ford is going to be another interesting guy. He's going to be tied to Deontay Foreman with Cleveland. And in this case, like if Deontay Foreman, and I can bring this one up when we talk about good old Kareem Hunt. Kareem Hunt was not brought in to be the receiving back last year for the Browns. He was brought in to be the goal line guy for the Browns. So when we talk about the two things that we want, let me bring up Jerome Ford. The two things that we want is receiving work and goal line work or red zone work. Well, Jerome Ford's going to get like half of that. And if this is the highest neutral pass rate offense that it was at the end of last year, when they were allowing Joe Flacco to throw all over the football field, Jerome Ford is going to have a lot more value because he does have the ability to be used in the design passing plays. He's also appears to not be a very good runner between the tackles. He does try and tend to bounce things, and that would probably be his downside. So what makes it really interesting to me is I'm expecting Deontay Foreman to step in and be 1-for-1 Kareem Hunt, which is going to be red zone opportunities, which is going to lower the overall ceiling of Jerome Ford. Now, these are guys that I'm generally very poor at evaluating because I don't know how Jerome Ford wins me leagues. What I can tell you with Jerome Ford right now at 120 on Fantasy Pros, and he is going I didn't pull him up on, or he's going 120 on ESPN. He's still going at relatively good cost. Last time I looked on Fantasy Pros, if I can't hunt him down, 121 on Fantasy Pros. Yeah, he's an RB2. Like that's just the long and short of it. Like he has almost zero way to win leagues, but he is an RB2 to start the season because of his ability to be a pass catcher with a certain amount of rushing upside. Now, he's going to have a limited role to score touchdowns, which I don't like, but like, yeah, you're looking at a guy that like is probably going to be flirting with 1,500 yards. And I don't know if and when Nick Chubb is going to come back based off the injury. So like, yeah, very, very sneaky pick. The other thing, because of like, I think they only paid like Deontay Foreman like $1.2 million, like not going to be surprised that he doesn't make the roster. And if that's the case, like if Jerome Ford is the guy, the bell cow to start the season, he absolutely becomes a smash. And that price should go up to reflect that. Now, Ty Chandler, I'm expecting some type of 50-50 timeshare when it comes to Aaron Jones. I've already talked about this a little bit. Because they paid Aaron Jones $7 million, if Aaron Jones over the age apex still has something to take, you may be looking at like more of a 40% Ty Chandler season at the price that he'd be going. Like, why not attached to like what projects to be an offense that we can't project in general. Ty Chandler was the guy last year at the end of the year. Like I'm always going to take the cheaper guy. That would be the idea behind this. But again, there's probably going to be other guys that I go after in this range. Chase Brown, he's going to be the RB1. Already talked about the Cincinnati backfield, so we can move on from that. The Chase Brown's going to be the guy who has the league winning upside if he gets the stuff. He's also the guy that is more likely to have less fantasy value if we're wrong, or if I'm wrong on the evaluation, or if I'm wrong on the pick. Trey Benson going to have league winning, or I shouldn't say league winning upside. Trey Benson not going to have league winning upside because I think if James Conner goes down because he's limited as a football player, Michael Carter, who's still on the roster, and DeMercado are going to take some of the snaps away. He would have some value as an RB2. He may end up having RB2 status at the end of the season. He's not without value. He just is an ugly story to tell. Blake Corum already talked about with Kyren Williams. Blake Corum is probably the guy to own, especially at this point in the draft. If you see that around this range, even on Fantasy Pros, you're just running out of guys that are going to have a lot of value when you get down to like your 13th round of your draft, something along that lines. And a guy like Blake Corum, he may be one of the few guys that have the ability to win leagues at this point in the draft. Like A shake and bake RB2 with league winning upside. Yeah, that's something I really like the ability to have at this point in the draft. All right, another drink of water. Finish this off. The rest of the guys should go relatively fast because we've already talked about most of these backfields. So Kendre Miller, he's side like anything about him other than a dart throw late in drafts attached to Alvin Kamara. This would maybe the most information that we could get out of this would be Alvin Kamara's like holdout, which I think is ridiculous with Alvin Kamara considering. So Kendre Miller could go up as long as Jamal Williams is there. I don't know how much I would have any interest in any of these guys to begin with. Like they're going to have 3 running backs. So maybe someone gets cut, maybe someone gets traded, maybe someone doesn't show up. I don't know. Jaleel McLaughlin, even if he's just never going to be anything more than a gadget guy, more likely for Denver. Esteme would be the guy that I'd be a little bit more interested in if certain things work out a particular way, but you're looking at like a cut and an injury for him to really have value. Marshawn Lloyd, I already talked about when it comes to the Packers offense. With AJ Dillon there, his upside is cut because even if Josh Jacobs goes down, AJ Dillon is going to be the dirty work back. He's probably the guy that they're going to trust more than Marshawn Lloyd to do pass protection, which means if he's not on the field for pass protection, that receiving work, the ability for receiving work is going to go down. All right, who's next? Alexander Madison. I'm not interested in. He's got like a $1.2 million deal to be potentially the backup to Zamir White. I don't think he's going to be a thing. Even if Zamir White goes down, I imagine he's not going to have the value because that's when Amir Abdullah is really going to kick in and do that part of the game. And then you're still looking at like Dylan Labe, the 6th round pick, the receiving back. Like that's a hard road. Chuba Hubbard's going to have a lot of value early in the season as they potentially, and I'm still waiting on news when it comes to Jonathan Brooks, if he's going to start the season on the pup or not. Even if he doesn't start the season on the pup, you're looking at Chuba Hubbard getting the snaps. And in this case, I can bring up our Brees shares and explain what happened last year with Brees to start the season off, where Brees goes like 31% snaps, 34% snaps, 49, 44, 52, 66. So in this time frame to start the year off in particular builds in deeper leagues, you're looking at a guy's going to get like 60, 70% snaps. The offense projects to be better because they can't be worse. And that's what you're getting a guy like. So even a guy like Chuba Hubbard is going to have a little bit more interest to me as a last round pick than some of these other guys. I do like the theoretical upside of Chandler, but it would depend on my build. If I need a guy that I'm going to slot in right away, Chuba Hubbard's going to have a way to win weeks in a way that Ty Chandler, some of these guys in this range are not going to do. Jerome Ford is going to be really interesting. Probably Jerome Ford is going to have more value than a Chuba Hubbard, even if they get the same type of snap share, because Jerome Ford's going to get the receiving work. Chuba Hubbard's going to be like, run back of offensive line guy. Miles Sanders, expecting that he's going to get cut or traded, so I don't care. There's almost zero way that he's going to be able to win any leagues. Rico Dowdle is going to be the more interesting guy when it comes to this backfield over Zeke. Zeke's over the age apex. Zeke's going to have the road, if I skipped over Zeke, the road to have this James Conner type of season. And I don't even see James Conner. This James Conner, well, the other guy I can talk about, I guess, would be Jamal Williams, because we already went over him. Jamal Williams. So the season that he had with 2022 Detroit, you're going to have that ability where Zeke can fall in the end zone like 15 to 17 times attached to a good offense. That's there. He doesn't have to be efficient. He's probably not going to get design receiving work. He may get just the goal line work attached to a good offense. There is a road there. Remember Tony Pollard, there's 57 vacated red zone opportunities. That's got to go to somebody. The league winning upside is going to be Rico Dowdle, but they didn't re-sign him. I think they only re-signed him for like 2 million to Zeke. Like, if you want a piece of this offense and you want it cheap, the safe play is Zeke. The league winning play is Rico Dowdle. Keaton Mitchell's off the board for multiple reasons. You're looking at injury, and then you're looking at, like, I don't know how valuable he's going to be with Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson, even if when he comes back and he's healthy. Khalil Herbert, not going to have a lot of fantasy value outside of an injury or a trade right now. CEH, like I'm not interested in. If there's an injury to Isaiah Pacheco, it may end up being a running back by committee. They may bring somebody in. CEH may end up being the third down, like pass blocking guy. Deneric Prince may be the guy that's interesting in that backfield if Isaiah Pacheco go down. Ray Davis is going to have a lot of is going to be very, very interesting to find out what goes on in camp. May end up jumping up here and being in this like David Montgomery type of tier of guys. So he may end up being very interesting. Going to have more interest to me to potentially destroy any value in James Cook and allow James Cook to go to somebody else's roster. More so than it really mattering to me. I don't know if he should be drafted. It's hard for Dre Davis to do what he needs to do unless he turns this into a 50-50 split. And here's the big asterisk to this. They're just like generally not going to put the wear and tear on Josh Allen, and they're going to give the goal line opportunities to Ray Davis. Roshan, very difficult way to be fantasy relevant this year for the Bears. Jalen Wright, again, you're looking at like multiple injuries for him to be interesting. More so, it's the offense and the draft capital with Jalen Wright, and then you need an injury. P. Ryan, same thing. Very crowded backfield. Probably going to be more interesting if he gets cut or traded, and then his landing spot. He would theoretically have the ability to be a very even. I would even go as far as say like P. Ryan in the right situation because of his skill set could be an ugly RB1, but he with the Broncos, he's attached to a lot of competition with Estime, Williams, McLaughlin. So he would need multiple injuries, or he'd have to go to someplace else. Tyrone Tracy, this is a guy that we're waiting on as a lottery ticket. Elijah Mitchell, I don't even know if Elijah Mitchell is necessarily going to be the handcuff with Gary Endo coming in. So that would be something to interest me. I don't know if I would even like be interested in that. Even if CMC goes down, I don't know if he would necessarily like step in and be the man one-to-one. Be something to be paying attention to in camp. We already talked about Jamal Williams. It's going to be very hard to figure out the Saints backfield before the start of the season. Even if certain things go a certain direction and you're looking at like Kamara gets cut or traded, he probably still doesn't have a value. If Williams gets cut or traded, it's going to be hard for him to win because outside of just being this like good football player who's older and athletically limited, I don't know. Tank Bigsby, this is a square peg that the Jaguars appear to want to fit in a round hole. I don't know how he does anything. Maybe a little bit more interest in Dearness Johnson being the handcuff than Tank Bigsby. Take another drink of water. Kenneth Gainwell, he's going to probably eat a little bit more into Saquon. The guy that I'm a little bit more interested in this backfield will be Will Shipley, the 4th round draft pick. Let's see, Braylon Allen. This gets really interesting. So he could theoretically, and well, I should say like this gets really interesting. He theoretically could be a priority handcuff attached to Breece Hall. He could also end up, if there's a Breece Hall injury, being in a timeshare with Isaiah Davis, the 5th round draft pick for the Jets, if Breece Hall goes down. And there's more ifs to this, Braylon Allen and Isaiah Davis could end up moving Breece from this unicorn high-end RB1 into more of a Devin A-Chain type of player. So there's more interest when it comes to Braylon Allen potentially turning Breece Hall, making Breece Hall a bust pick than there is how much Braylon Allen is actually going to have fantasy value this year, even with a Breece injury, because of this really interesting Isaiah Davis pick. Like some of the other guys I've been listening to, like talk about camp news. Like I guess they really do like Isaiah Davis. He's South Dakota State, so like Izzy Benaken is gone. Like he just might as well just not show up to work anymore. And then Isaiah Davis and Braylon Allen. And the more they like Isaiah Davis and Braylon Allen, it gets really interesting. Especially, and this is where it gets like really, again, interesting, is I've talked about this before. I don't know how much you want to take your sports car and use them as a brick wall in the passing game. So Aaron Rodgers, he has to trust these rookies to pick up pass pro. With Breece Hall, like how much you want Breece Hall to be wasting opportunities on the field when he's not going to get the football. Like there's like a real world fantasy football type of conversation to be had when it comes to this Jets backfield down the line. All right, Justice Hill, not going to have any fantasy value. I imagine that Marcin Ali, the 5th round pick from Marshall, may have more value if there's an issue with Derrick Henry. The other thing with Derrick Henry is Ali, more so than Justice, would be the guy that I would expect to maybe eat into Derrick Henry. Justice Hill's fantasy outlook is more, hey, he's maybe the 3rd down guy attached to this offense in a way Derrick Henry wasn't last year. So the other thing to talk about with Derrick Henry, and this may be what carries over from the from the Titans to the Ravens, Derrick Henry was only doing about 50% snaps last year. He's only on the field to do Derrick Henry things. He's not going to be on the field to do non-Derrick Henry things. That hurts Derrick Henry. That's probably the biggest upside to Justice Hill. Chase Edmonds, I'm not interested in. Bucky Irving, the 4th round draft pick, would be the guy I'd be interested in this case. Talk about Eric Gray potentially being the RB1 for the Giants. The Giants offense has to be better on top of that, but he would be the guy that may have league winning upside. He may be this year's Kyron Williams. If we're putting our ears to the railroad tracks and trying to read those tea leaves, it would be Eric Gray. Right now, Ty Johnson, he's going to be the guy that's going to be a little bit interesting when it comes to the upside of James Cook and potentially the upside of Ray Davis. If Ty Johnson is still going to be a part of the offense and doing 20% snaps, this really damages James Cook and Ray Davis. All right. Amir Abdullah, he's going to be the pass blocking special teams back for the Raiders. Not going to have a lot of value. More interested in Dylan Labe. Naheem Hines, I maybe return. I don't know how he's fantasy valuable. Damian Pierce, I would maybe say there's not going to be surprised he gets traded. Even if Joe Mixon goes down, maybe there's a chance that Damian Pierce eats into some of the dirty work stuff for Joe Mixon to keep Joe Mixon upright. Even if Joe Mixon goes down, I don't know how much more than an RB2 Damian Pierce would have in this offense. He doesn't even seem like he fits into the offense from a schemes perspective. Isaiah Davis already talked about. Deontay Foreman may have a little bit of an ability to start the season off and be like 60% snaps, like goal line type of guy attached to this Cleveland offense. I don't think he's going to get receiving work. A little bit of interest depending on if he makes the roster, and that's the way that they want him to go, with the expectation that Nick Chubb's going to come back. Michael Carter, probably going to be the 1B or 1A if James Conner goes down. I mean, it's a hard road with Michael Carter for him to it's a hard road because they also have Trey Benson. It's like really hard. If he makes the roster, he may not make the roster last year of his deal after being picked up coming off waivers from the Jets. Dearness Johnson may be the priority handcuff to Travis Etienne. I don't know how much fantasy value he has one way or another. Deuce Vaughn's going to be a gadget guy. Dare is going to be the receiver for the Houston. Maybe he's a 3rd round back in the first place. AJ Dillon's going to be a role guy. Chris Rodriguez, we already talked about a little bit. Travion Williams, I don't think is a thing. Evan Hull may end up having a lot of interest as the guy if as a priority handcuff if Jonathan Taylor goes down. Craig Reynolds not interested in. Will Shipley, a little bit of interest in Will Shipley, especially if more interest that Will Shipley is going to eat into Saquon, cap the Saquon upside. Maybe he ends up being, in a 50-50 timeshare if Barkley goes down. Good old Kyle Juszczyk, always, you should be a Hall of Famer, but fantasy not relevant. Cordell Patterson, I think he's going to be a return guy. Isaiah Spiller, this is where Kaimani Vidal should go, and we'll talk about him. So Kaimani Vidal is probably if we're talking about another guy that theoretically could be a league winner. I don't like the 5th round draft capital. He would be the guy that does project best to be the bell cow. Now I'm going to break down the Chargers a little bit more when we talk about like Ladd McConkey and Justin Herbert. But to finish all this off, this guy, out of all the guys that are out there, and I'd have to look a little bit more at my notes, this guy would be the guy that like has the ability to win leagues if everything breaks the right direction, and he is the starting running back for the Chargers to start the season off. So anyway, it's been about an hour and a half. I have broken down all my running back targets. You're looking at let's see. Obviously, the top 20 guys I like. Rashad White has the ability to be a unicorn. Josh Jacobs is going to have the ability to be attached to a good offense. I do like Ramondre a lot now because of the signing. Jonathan Brooks is going to have a lot of second half value. Zamir White to be in that opportunity funnel. Zach Moss probably going to be like good in this range late. These are all dart throws when it comes to like Charbonnet, Chandler, Chase Brown. I really like Blake Corum at this range of the draft. And the only other guy that I'm really interested right now in listening to is Kaimani Vidal to finish all this stuff off. Maybe Eric Gray or Tyrone Tracy. The other thing with Tyrone Tracy and Eric Gray and Devin Singletary, it just could turn into this ugly running back by committee, and then it doesn't matter at that point. So those are my running back targets. Some of these guys will move up. Some of these guys will move down. And yeah, hopefully I'll get the one of the other target videos done this upcoming week.